In the previous video, we just created our skybox here, which allows us to have a pretty nice sky because we created a gradient with the shader, a gradient between two colors here. Easier to calculate on mobile because our sky it's actually a cube. Remember, we created a giant cube, and it's much easier to calculate than a procedural sky, for example, like we have by default in Unity. So there's just one thing that bothers me. For the moment the game is totally empty, and I need to have some graphic elements, some reference points to be able to work better and to project myself. So what we'll do, I told you that we're not going to create a real game, we're just going to create a template, but we'll add a few small elements so that we can project ourselves more easily. So going to game objects and 3D objects, cube, to create a cube. We're going to create a sort of path so that it looks like we're on a road, and then we'll make sure that we can slalom on this road to avoid obstacles. Here's the general idea. I'm going to rename the cube to ground because we'll create the ground first. This ground will be positioned at 0, minus 2.60 for the moment. So the cube is here now, it's in front of the camera. But I'm going to position it further away, in 250, very, very far away. This will need to create a big road. I'll give it 4 units of width, 0.2 in height, and 550 in length. You can take the same parameters I'm setting here, or set your own. So, I've created kind of big road here, and as you can see, it's perfectly aligned with the camera. If you look at the camera, it's in the center of the scene, in 0, 1, minus 10. It's tilted like this, and so the road looks like it goes on forever. Okay. We can create a material. We have the materials folder here. Right-click, create material. I'll call it ground. We'll add the ground on the floor, and for now we'll give it a little bit of a blue color, but that will change later. Here, for the color, there is something to respect. I just try to give you all the advice I can. Sometimes I have a lot of little tips, sometimes I wouldn't think of giving them to you, but if one day I realize that I forgot to share with you some tips that in the end are super useful, I arrange to make bonus videos in order to share with you all these tips, so that you have the maximum of information to succeed. So, about this tip, you should avoid using colors too bright. It's not very fashionable anymore, and the editors don't like it very much. Don't use flashy colors. I mean, here, when you put the slider on the top right here, whatever color you choose, don't use flashy colors. Here, see, just a little bit less flashy. Or, yeah, you can take maybe red, but don't go in the top right. You're going to go more towards pastel. The fashion right now is more pastel colors, so avoid going too much on flashy tones. And once you have a pastel color that you like, you can adjust to find the shade you need, but stay on pastel. So that was the first tip. If you ask the editors, they'll tell you the same thing. That's what's in demand nowadays. It's more colors like that. Okay, now we have created the ground. We'll create an object which will be the player. Game object. No, I did game object random cheats. Not that at all. Game object 3D object cube. We'll create the player, so the player will also be a cube. We will position it in 0, minus 2, 0. So the cube will be placed in front of the camera like this. And I put it in minus 2 because it's like it's on the ground actually. So here the cube will be in front, well placed in front of the camera. Okay, here we go. Now we'll create a material. Right-click, create material. I'll call it player, and then we'll add the material here. We'll choose a color that we like in the inspector. We can take a blue this time, and likewise we'll stay on pastel. Here, so that will be the player. Now, I'm going to prepare the different items we'll need to create our mini game. We're going to create obstacles over here. These obstacles are going to come up to the player, and the goal for the player will be to slalom around the obstacles. If you remember in the first introduction videos, I talked about making a skiing game, for example, of the arrival of the Winter Olympics. Well, the code we're going to do here, you can use exactly this code to make a ski game. You replace the 3D model here with a skier, a 3D model here with a downhill snow run, and the obstacles with pine trees, and then you have your game. So what I'm going to do is just duplicate the cube, and I'll place it in such a way that it's out of the camera's field of view. You see, here we see it up, it's visible and not visible. I place it outside the camera's field of view. I look at what that corresponds to, let's say -6.5. Try to put some precise values. We'll enlarge it so it takes up the whole surface like this. And we'll rename it to out, for example, for the exit. It's basically an obstacle, and if the obstacles that are there to hit the player touch this cube, it means that the player will have touched them, since the obstacles will be behind the player. And if the obstacle that goes down collides with the end obstacle here, it means that the player has totally avoided and dodged this obstacle. So I place this here, which will allow me to detect the collision. Then the player who is here, I will also duplicate him. So I select him, and to duplicate it is Ctrl D. And now I create an obstacle much further ahead, for example, 40 meters ahead, or even 50 meters. So now we'll have obstacles appearing here. What we'll do is rename this to obstacle. We'll duplicate it with Ctrl D. And by holding down Ctrl, we're going to move it. Holding down Ctrl allows us to move it by increments. You see, if I don't hold down Ctrl, it moves like this, and if I hold down Ctrl, it moves one step at a time. So what I'm doing is just a marker for me to position the obstacles in the 3 possible places. These are the possible places where the obstacles will appear. We'll do something that will generate the obstacles infinitely at these 3 positions. Now, I create material, right-click, create material, and I'll call it obstacle. I'll call the one in the middle, because the others will just be markers. And again, we'll give it a color, get a yellow one this time maybe, the pastel yellow, always stick with pastel. And as I said, I will give you as many tips as possible. Here's another tip. This is a tip that will allow you to choose beautiful complementary colors between them. You go to the website color.adobe.com. It's called the color wheel. It's the Adobe color wheel, and it's a tool that will allow you to find complementary colors. There you have lots of types of complementarity. So I like to take, for example, just complementary here. Or you can take shared complementary. You have lots of filters. You have the main color that you can spot with the little triangle here that appears in the circle. This main color you take, and then you select your main color, which is the one in the center. You choose the color you want. Let's say this one. And automatically, when you have chosen a color, Adobe will suggest complementary colors that go perfectly with it and together. And then you have your palette that has been generated. So we can now, retrieve those colors. It's pretty easy. I'll take a screenshot. We all have a tool that allows us to take a screenshot. We'll do this to copy the colors. I'm going to do save. I save it in a folder here, in the Unity asset folder. I go back to Unity. Now I have my texture here that has been imported. Little trick for this texture, we can put it in a mode, I select the texture, I can put it in sprite mode, for example. I click on apply. So now I can place the texture in Unity, like in the 3D world. Now I've imported my textures, and what's the point of having done all this? It's that now I can select the player, for example, and for the player's color, instead of manually choosing a color, I just take the eyedropper and pick the color. Same for the obstacle, I take the dropper and I pipe the color. Same for the ground, pipe it, and I pipe the color. And now we have perfectly complementary colors, which so have been generated with the Adobe Color Wheel. Now I can do the same for the sky. I can take the blue here, plus the blue here, suggested by Adobe, and now even my sky has complementary colors. So this was just a little trick that I recommend you use if you don't want to waste time looking for good colors. You have a tool that's there for you to find some color that blend really well together. Then you can generate your palette like that pretty easily. Well, for the moment I will stop here for this video. We added a few 3D elements that will allow us to have a better reference here to be able to project ourselves more easily on the development of the game. And we will continue to prepare our template in the next video.